So hello guys and welcome to a code review video. Today we are going to take a look at the HLE BIOS improvements that I've made like 2 years ago. So it almost felt like forever for me. So this was before COVID happened. And the reason why I even worked on that in the first place was because, some games that I wanted to play without an official BIOS would simply have weird issues or they would not boot at all. So, for example, Crash Team Racing, it will boot to the warning, the disclaimer screen, and then it will just freeze. It will not go past that. And of course, during my investigation, I later found out why this happened. But yeah, this did require me to do some research. So let's let's just go through the post that I wrote for the pull request that I've made, and as you can see, there are 51 commits, and most of them are quite minor because most of these are checks, but there are quite a few important ones, including um, the garbage area, which I will talk about in detail, and also a few suggestions that were made by Senquak, and he even provided me with a few patches of his own to fix some issues. But unfortunately, I don't think his fixes actually fix anything. It's mostly just conformance with the official BIOS. So yeah, let's read my post. So this is a bunch of patches to improve the HLE BIOS in PCSX Rearmed. This should hopefully address some of the broken games listed in 6. So let's take a look at that. And they actually mention CTR and also Final Fantasy VIII, which unfortunately still doesn't work. Metal Gear Solid, Metal Slug, uh, Misadventure of Troban, Police Knots, Raystone, Road Rush, and Ridge Racer Revolution. Now, I was able to try all of these, but I did try a bunch of them, and most of them were fixed. But yeah, there are still some games that I have not tried. Uh, so yeah, so I talk about how some patches that came from upstream were never merged, and that's true. These patches mostly fix saving issues in some games, and that said, they did not work right out of the box. So I did have to modify them because it would fix a game, but then it would broke another. So it took me a while to find out how I could fix it properly. And let's start with Digimon World. So that game, without the fixes, you would it would not detect any kind of inputs, and also even if you fix that, it will also have saving issues. But let's talk about the input fixes. So these games require proper implementation of enter critical. Setting 1 to V0 could fix the games, but it could also break other games assuming V0 is equal to 0. Sometimes this properly implements intercritical according to no cache documentation. Now, if we take a look at the no cache PCX documentation, hold on. Fuck, actually, alright, so yeah, this is the one. So disables interrupt by clearing SR, so cop 0 R12, bit 2 and bit 10, of which bit 2 gets copied to bit 0 once returning from the syscall exception, return 1 if both bits were set, return 0 if one or both of the bits were already 0, and this would actually cause a few issues in some games, and one of them is actually Digimon World. I thought it was just Medieval too, but it turns out that Digimon World was also affected. But luckily, in my case, I believe it was implemented already in PCSX, but in some way. So yeah, now my version of it was a bit messier. It didn't look that nice. It did work, but not that nice. So no cache documentation says it should return 0 if one or none of the bits was changed, and return 0 if both bits were set. This fixes Medieval 2, which would freeze upon starting a game, and this properly fixes Digimon World crashing. With fixed STR card implementation, it could also possibly fix other games. So this mostly fixes the intercritical function according to what the official BIOS behaves like. And originally in the documentation, as you can see, it says that it fixes SpongeBob, Cold Blood, Fear Effect, Martian Gothic, and Medieval, but some games will actually assume that V0 will be, 0. So this finally fixes it properly, as intended. Now let's take a look at str cut. Now the reason why I even fixed this function is because I noticed that while debugging the game, because yes, if we take a look at the PCSX BIOS log, you could actually turn off the logging and see what the games actually do. So in the case of Digimon World, I noticed that it would stay stuck on str cuts, and looking at the documentation, I realized that none of the functions had checks to, because sometimes games will just trigger the checks and nothing will happen on real hardware basically. But unfortunately, when that does happen and you assume that the games use the functions properly, then you will get weird issues like this one. So let's take a look at str cuts. So there we go. Append source to the end of DST, searches the ending 0 byte in destination and copies the source to that address up to including 0 byte in source, returns the incoming destination value. Now this is the important bit. Refuses to do anything if source or destination is 0 and returns 0 in that case. So basically the source is A0 and the destination is A1 and return 0. So in this case it's V0, and I believe this one I noticed that they would do this each time that they would return a function. So we had to do that, and then we just terminate the function by returning. So let's take a look at that, the function as a whole. So basically this is what a simple function in the HLE BIOS would look like. So this is a check, and this is the actual implementation of it, and then it will return the result. So V0 would always be what the function actually returns. So that was str code, and yeah. So then I mentioned once those fixed are merged, Digimon World could sometimes have broken controls, which is addressed by the checks in pad init. So let's take a look at that. So there we go. So again, same thing, although the checks look a bit different. Now in the commit I said no cache documentation says that function fails if type is not OX2 or OX00001 etc. on. In case of failure, it should return 0. If not, it should return 2. And it sometimes Y2 and not 1, and it seems to be at random sometimes. Like the BIOS will have weird implementations or questionable behavior. so let's take a look at pad init. Actually, no. Alright, actually, shit. Actually, I'm not sure how. Oh, right, maybe it's called init card. No, that's for the memory card, not. Maybe it's called init pad. Yes, that's what it's called. Alright, so what it says about uh, init pad. So basically, it explains, but uh, now that I read the function, uh, so yeah, as you can see, it can be quite a guessing game to what it actually does, because even if you read the documentation, this may not be obvious. So yeah, it does say that it initially zero fills the buffers, which we are not doing, and once your IQ is processed and etc. So I'm not sure where I got that from, but for me it fixed the input issues with Digimon World. So yeah, now that I go back to whatever I wrote, so I actually forgot this one, why I came up with these numbers, like uh, yeah. I believe it's yeah, so yeah, basically and it doesn't say anywhere that I should return 2 as well. Well, it does say that I should zero fill the buffers, but again it doesn't do that either. It does do it on startup, but it doesn't do it when well, it says that it initially does it, and then until the REQ is processed, because you see the functions, they don't actually block. They are not serial per se. They are more like basically you cannot implement the functions in a way that they would wait from a response from an RIQ and so on. So this does block some and cause some issues with some functions. So yeah, I did have to do that for the game. I believe I took that one from an official patch. So let's take a look at this. Well, actually, let's just read on. So, Lego Racers and Parasite Eve. Lego Racers is particular because it would fail when creating a save. The fix is suggested by a forum user would fix Lego Racers, but would then break games like Parasite Eve 2. It's only after combining some other patches and some testing against Parasite Eve 2 did did this game get properly fixed save wise. Note that Parasite Eve 2 is very finicky and you may have to turn on and off the Parasite Eve 2 hack on the fly to make it work, because yeah, in PCSX Rearmed, no matter if you use the official BIOS or not, it will still require a hack to actually make the game to run, and unfortunately that is a CPU interpreter issue, as well as an issue with the dynamic. So unfortunately it's not quite accurate and it will cause issues with some games like that, and properly fixing that issue would require a much more slower and more accurate CPU interpreter or dynamic. So they just use a hack for this one, which doesn't fix it properly, I should say. So yeah, let's take a look at the merges from upstream. So they are quite complex, as you can see. but what it does is mostly replacing the macro function that was used by actually properly doing it the proper way by taking function parameters and then taking care of some edge cases. And there were some comments that were added to it, and then making sure that it actually saves to the proper memory cards. Now this is interesting. So I would recall that this is actually the fix for Lego Racer. So basically you need to check for the size, but only after copying to the memory, because you see, because otherwise it would not detect a memory card, or it would behave as if there was no memory card. So that's the actual fix for Lego Racers that you are looking at here, and what it fixed. And there was this issue that I recall that comes from upstream, although I don't recall a game that will fix. Actually, maybe one that is an RPG that it fixed. Basically, I believe this checks for the return. You know, the special byte that tells that it is the end of a character or an array. So that was one of the first patches, and this one again is also an upstream patch, and it fixed this one in particular. Well, I mentioned in the comment that along with the previous patch, this should fix the save issues in Digimon World, and it actually returns the proper return bytes as well. And I also uncommented this because previously, this one. Oh, actually, it's not commented. It's just that it takes the deliver event, but it actually returns the result, and that fixed the some of the save issues. Sorry, that I encountered. So that's why. So now let's take a look at the more interesting bit. So Crash Team Racing, R-Types, and Fade to Black. These games would not get past the first logo screen. After reading no cache documentation, I found a small section called Garbage Area at address 0, where it would describe some games like R-Types reading from address 0 and would subsequently crash if the first bytes in memory are set to 0. Fade to Black is a bit more extreme in that it can crash upon memory access if byte 5 is not properly set, although saving still doesn't work properly, and that's because it's a separate issue altogether. This game actually suffers from the garbage area as well as the memory card save issue, which I'll get to later. Crash Team Racing is actually a bit different, because the HLE BIOS would set the third and fourth byte to a non-zero value for reasons unknown. Because you see, actually, when the HLE BIOS was first implemented, they actually filled some of the garbage areas with some random values that make absolutely no sense, and no explanation was given to these, and would crash as a result. I have commented that out because no explanation is given. It breaks more stuff than it fixes, if anything. So let's take a look at the garbage area function. So alright, so this is upon initializing the HLE BIOS in memory, as you can see. And the way it works is that it sets up the BIOS table and the functions, and as you can see, all of it is not implemented. Some of them are just stubs, like all of these, but some are simply not implemented. But yeah, so it would set up the bits, and I actually commented that out because this code would actually touch the garbage area, and they would provide no explanation as to why they did that. Then I would actually set up the garbage area. So in no cache documentation, this is explained as such. So archetypes. Alright, so this is what the documentation says about the garbage area. The first some bytes of memory address 0 aren't actually used by the kernel except for storing some garbage at that location. However, this garbage is actually important for some bugged games like R-types and Fade to Black, games that do read from address 0 due to uninitialized pointers. Initially, the garbage area is containing a copy of the 16-byte exception handler at address 80, but the first 4 bytes are typically smashed, set to free from some useless dummy writes and some useless CD-ROM delays, i.e. the first 16 bytes should have these values. But then they explain that normally it should have this, but then it gets overwritten to these afterwards. And then this byte would have these values, or this one in an older BIOS revision. For R types, the half word at 0 must be non-zero, or else the game will do a DMA to address 0 and thereby destroy kernel memory. Fade to Black does several garbage reads from 0 to 9. A wrong byte value at 7 can 5 can cause the game to crash with an invalid memory access exception upon memory card access. So the game will actually work, but memory card access will not work properly. So this is important because initially I thought that this would only fix 2 games, but as it turns out, it actually fixed the boot logo issue in Crash Team Racing. So initially that game, as I said before, it would not get past the disclaimer screen, but after I implemented the fixes, it will actually start to work. So yeah, and as I said, actually I made a mistake because, well, actually no, I did it properly. So this is the initial value, but then it gets overwritten by that. And we mostly care about the overrated value, so we use 3 and then 0, 0, 0, 0. Now, they do mention that they use this value for the older BIOS, but I'm not aware of any game that relies on that or that even care about that. And most that do would usually patch the BIOS for that purpose, but they don't do it, so it doesn't matter. So that's the garbage area. It's quite interesting, really, that some games would rely on initialized memory to even work out. And then I mentioned a couple of issues. So other games being fixed, either booting or saving, include Yu-Gi-Oh!, Metal Slug X, which was fixed, GTA 2. Now for GTA 2, it's interesting because in GTA 2 they actually had a hack before for this one, but it wasn't a proper hack because yeah, that's for it was in heap, and they had this hack that said and basically the comment said that commenting this out fixes GTA 2 crash. But after I merged all of my fixes and then commented that out, the game still worked. So I'm not sure if that's necessary, and I didn't try to play the game like extensively, and upon trying the game, it will still work fine. So therefore, I thought that this was unnecessary, and that's why I commented that out. Then I mentioned a few games that that were still broken. One of them is Digimon Rumble Arena, and the game simply refuses to boot. What I say is that it switches threads, then gets seemingly stuck. Uh, the switching thread thing is what I actually noticed. And we had a partial fix for that, which was given to me thanks to Senkwak. Shit. Um, so, moment stop, merge interrupt fix. Yeah, that one. So yeah, a return value is always 1 for closed thread and changed thread. According to no cache documentation, change thread and closed thread should always return 1. Fix it accordingly. So if we take a look at closed thread, it says that it should indeed return always 1, even if the handle was already closed. So it doesn't matter, it will always return 1. Now in this case I actually did a mistake because, no, actually never mind. I just set it to 1 for both functions. Now previously it would return 0 sometimes, but in actual reality, sorry, it always returns 1. Sorry, so uh, that got fixed. Uh, but there was another fix that unfortunately I can't find. I believe it's this one. No, it's not that one. Uh, no, it's not that one either. I believe it's this one. Well, actually, that's one of the fixes that I got. That is related actually to Digimon. So let's take a look at it still. So no cache says it should return 0 if event is unused. So here, which it already does. So it might be safe to remove the warning about it. See why. Then if it says that it should return 0 if event is ready, here's the constant value. When that happens, it should also set it to ready, so active, unless event mode is this value. If it is a callback event, then documentation says it should be stuck in the loop forever. So basically, it will just crash. It also says that it can sometimes return 0, a bug according to no cache, especially if it switched from already to active. And I'm not actually implementing that, I think. Yeah, I'm not. I just set the return value to 0 because it doesn't say actually anything about this, so I just assume that it should return 0. I even comment on that, saying said return value was previously set to 1, but for some reasons. Alright, back. So sorry. So basically, said return value was previously set to 1 for some reason, but I set it to 0. Now it should cover all corner cases. We should be returning 0 instead by default to cover the bug. This should behave how most games expect it to behave now, and should make it more robust. So That's one thing that I actually fixed in response to Digimon Rumble Arena still not working, and unfortunately, it did not fix that game. So, but it was still, it was still something that I wanted to fix despite that. And this was also one of the things that I fixed after trying to fix Digimon Rumble Arena. I also fixed some mistakes because while doing the review, uh, I'll notice that I did some mistakes, so that happens. So yeah, I actually can't find the fix that I did before, but that doesn't matter. So yeah, so Digimon Rumble Arena doesn't work. Now, then there is actually the save issue. So Nuclear Strike, Ape Escape, this game will crash upon memory card access, and I wrote an extensive, issue about it on my own fork, and I said Nuclear Strike works generally fine on PCX for all with BIOS, with the HLE BIOS, except for one glaring flaw: it does not detect any memory card. And when the code is fixed for that, and by that I mean forcing the detection of the memory card, it crashes horribly. An issue on PCX, on PCSX for all has been open about this, and here's what they said about it. Actually, it's not for PCSX for all; it was for PCSX Reloaded, and they had a mailing list before they shut down. And this is what they said: Nuclear Strike does not save or load memory. It says no card detected. If you remove the comment from deliver events in card info, the game still faults when trying to load the game. This is the backtrace, and then they show that it does indeed crash on card info, the function. And one of the devs commented and said, this game creates a callback and handles memory card reading state machine through those callbacks. Now on HLE BIOS level, this means lots of recursion, and since every HLE BIOS calls allocated stack frame, it overflows at some point. Notice below the number of increasing reads, I believe, after card info, which signifies recurse call number within HLE soft call. And then they show, I believe, some kind of backtrace. I'm not sure how to handle these situations, but maybe either fake call change somehow, but how? Create BIOS functions that don't allocate stack frame each time, removing, I didn't comment out that indeed it does cause the issues as explained, and then they indeed call the function recursively, and I then said that it was called more than 4,000 times before the stack is overrun and the game crashes. And I said that I wasn't sure how I would fix that, uh, but it doesn't prevent the game from being playable. And this is not the only game that actually suffered from this issue. There are there are at least four games that suffer from this issue, even maybe six of them. So one of them is App Escape, Ridge Racer Type 4, Gran Turismo, Final Fantasy 8, uh, Nuclear Strike, of course, and I believe some other game as well. Now, there was another bug report from another developer that said this game has the same fundamental issue like Nuclear Strike, that the game jumps back to BIOS execution after callback, and since HLE BIOS does not have any delays or so, then excess card info calls cause deadlocking. I'm not going to fix this on Nuclear Strike anytime soon since it requires a lot of work and I don't have any ideas how to fix it elegantly without adding those poor delays to HLE BIOS. which made this official Sony BIOS so poor in performance because indeed, even despite the technical, the hardware implementation of the memory card by in hardware, it's actually even more slowed down because of the implementation of reading from the memory card. So that was made even slower because of that. And then commented that I guess it could be fixed by adding those delays. Then I said that it will also increase the CPU cycle. I'm still not sure how I would even add delays because it's not like I can just put a sleep function and then it will work. That wouldn't be the proper way of doing that. Now, someone said that I could instead make sure that it doesn't allocate stack. That could be one way of fixing it. But yeah, that's an issue that unfortunately I still couldn't fix. Now there's another game, Roswell Conspiracies, Alien Myth and Legends. That game also does not work on no cache PS1 emulator, even with the official BIOS, I believe. I said blast screen with GUI upon starting new game, no cutscene, unplayable. And this game would be partially affected by the garbage area issue. So if your garbage area is not set properly, it would not even get there at all. It would crash much earlier than that. But even if you fix that, the game would still have this issue. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to fix that. Now I do mention next Final Fantasy VIII, and it still has the memory card issue that Nuclear Strike Escape suffer from. But it's done in not, but it's not done in a way of recursive calls or whatever. It actually does not even detect a memory card at all, even if you have saves on it. And then I also mentioned that the game will freeze if you try to enter a battle. And again, I still don't know why it does that, and that's a shame. Also, Digimon Rumble Arena, there is an open BIOS that was implemented uh, for another PCSX Reloaded project. So hold on. Hopeful. Oh, right. So Redux, MIPS, Open BIOS, and yeah. So they are actually trying to recreate the BIOS of the PS1, and that one actually fixes the Digimon Rumble Arena issue, locking issue in for the HLE BIOS. So that could be something that I could use as a workaround, but unfortunately, this BIOS would still not work for some games like Digimon World. Like it would fix the no sound issue of Digimon World, but then it will also not save properly. So yeah. I then talk about Fade to Black, how it's still unable to load the same issue as Final Fantasy VIII. Then I would mention save issues in Digimon World, and that one is a bit more obscure. So some sound effects would not play properly at all, despite the fixes. So I'm not actually sure about that. Then I also mentioned Jumping Flash. Been told this game would crash on HLE, but I need to try it myself. Basically, the bug report said that the game would not get past the disclaimer screen. So again, that's a good issue. It seems to be very similar to the Metal Gear Solid issue. So that game would not also boot out. Then I talk about Formula 1 2001. Crashes during loading screen. Works fine on my PCSX 404 over HLE, reason unknown. So that one is an issue that is specific to PCSX Rearmed. That game will not work at all. And I think that could be because the PCSX for old folk, they actually added some code within the GTU, the CPU related code to make sure that the HLE BIOS will work properly. But the modifications are so extensive that it's hard to track down what actually causes the game to be fixed. I have not noticed any regressions, but it would be nice if someone could take a look at the patches. And all of these. Now note I said that this is definitely an improvement. He then noticed that some leftover code. He then talks about how this area would actually corrupt the memory of the emulator. I then talk about that the fact that he can read this sector is actually a bug in the implementation, but it still does it. But he said that we should avoid doing that anyway because it would be out of bound and cause an overflow issue. So I fixed the code to only limit to free FF. He then says that this doesn't make any sense, and then I remove bad stop. He then says what this N is for, and I explain. And then I said that I'm not sure why they did that, and then I took out the code. It still worked fine, by the way. Then fix it properly, bad stop. Then talk about what I fixed after the initial code review, and that's when I added the garbage area issue. Then he said that, well, you're doing it wrong, you should use swap U32 instead, and then it got past the review. But after that I merged the pull requests. I actually did a mistake. So someone fixed it for me, thankfully. But yeah, I actually forgot to save back to the memory card after doing the right function. So some games will read the memory card but will not actually save. And it's funny because I thought that was a mistake on my part, and I noticed that CTR would not save my saves, but thankfully someone actually found the issue and fixed it for me. So a big thanks to that guy. Unfortunately, he removed his user account. I'm not sure why, by the way. Yeah, as you can see, it took me quite a few months to both prior to the pull request to actually fix these issues. So I'm glad that I worked on that in the first place, because this made a huge difference for people. So finally the HLE BIOS was actually a viable alternative to the official BIOS, but unfortunately some games would still not work properly, and but at least it still fixed a lot of save issues that I had before. So I also took the time to merge some fixes that were found in the other MIPS fork of it. So yeah, there was also an interrupt R26. I'm not sure what it fixed actually. That fix came from Dimitri Smagin. So thanks to him again, and SendQuad. But let's take a look at a few functions that I wrote also. So let's take a look at the stub. So this is typically what a stub would look like. So for example, you want to implement a stub for a function, this is how we would do it. So a return value, and then you pretty much return the call. So yeah, it's simple, and then you add it to the BIOS table. It's that simple, really. So that's what a stub looks like. we need some variables just to make sure. So yeah, I needed to make sure that these were set properly in case that someone resets the game. Then there's card status, which is again the stub. Now, actually, so yeah, this one, I recall that one, yeah. So this one I remember because this is a stub, but one game actually needs it to save properly. So according to a user on PCSX Reloaded Complex, now dead, this fixed the loading saving issue in Final Fantasy Tactics. Now after I merged the fix, the game would actually save, but I did not actually try without the fix. But since the game actually worked without it, uh, at least saving in that game, uh, you know, I was surprised that it was that simple, really. So that's why. Now let's take a look. Now you may have noticed that a lot of these functions are mostly checks that I added to functions. Has to mimic the real BIOS. So for example, for bcopy, no cache documentation say that the function refuses to copy any data if destination is null or the size of it is greater than 0 uh, 7 ffffff, which is yeah. So when that happens, it just terminates the function call, and then comment that in any case return value is always destination. Then for b0, so that's actually a memset, but unlike memset, all it does is just initialize the memory to this a given area or pointer to 0. Only return 0 if size is in value. Return destination if not, and that's what I implemented. So yeah, I would always return destination, but return 0 if it meets those checks. Then fix up. Yeah, I would constantly fix errors that I made. Now this function, I had a lot of trouble, and it's still not fixed properly. By the way, it still not mimics exactly what it does because it's quite complex. So better real log implementation. This should be closer to the real behavior as described by Nocash. It doesn't do any bcopy though, but it shouldn't be too much different other than that. So I explained in the comments, if old buff is 0, execute malloc, then return R2 and or 0 if it failed. So basically it just makes a call to malloc. Else, if new size is 0, execute free, then return garbage, which is what the free function does. Now this is the complicated part. Else execute malloc, bcopy, then free, then return a new buffer. Now what it does is just takes the old implementation and just put it there, but it doesn't do exactly what it is supposed to do. So basically what I should have been doing is just take the implementation of malloc, then do the bcopy, then free the memory, then free the old buffer, and then return the new buffer. But that wouldn't make any sense, so we just did it that way. Now str end cuts, then it's just a check, nothing special. Now there are sometimes magic bytes are used, and The documentation says that it should return the IO address, and then said that I dump any games use it, but it doesn't hurt to have it. So I just returned the IO address because it wasn't doing it before. And that's the kind of strange stuff that the BIOS would do. I'm not sure why, by the way. So yeah, that was the. I also had so yeah, this is what Notaz was talking about when he was talking about potentially corrupting the emulator. But these are simply actually checks that just returns if if it goes overbound, and then it just returns 0. I'm not sure of any games that rely on that though. But when I did all of these, it actually fixed a game that would previously not work and would just magically work. So I believe that was the Japanese game with the little girl that would go around and then swing a fishing rod or something. I forgot that game, but yeah, that fixed that game. All of these fixes, and they were surprised when I did that. So that was the code review. So let me show you my photo that I did of it. Oh, let's see. So yeah, I actually archived the repo because I opened another one. But yeah, if we take a look at the closed issues, this is what I would say. And you can see that as far as February of 2019, I would investigate the HLE BIOS. I thought at first that it was an issue with the sound plugging or SPU synchronization, but it turns out it was not related. It was just a BIOS issue, which in hindsight makes sense, but and there are sometimes games that were not affected by the BIOS implementation, but it was related to the PIO memory area not being cleared properly. So let's take a look at it. So he had a simple fix for that game, and the fix was simply to set the PIO area to being used basically. So this is what the FF is like. So that was the comment from him. Fixes Tetris with Car Raptor Sakura. Thanks for Game Blah Blah for finding this issue and pointing out that nothing had a fix for it. It's adapted here in a simpler form. And basically, the reason why this game does that is because this is actually a cheat detector uh, or a mod chip detector. So if you had like a mod chip in your PS1 and you would try to boot that game, it would simply not work because it would check for the PIO memory area, and if it detects that it is basically all 0, it would just crash. So yeah, and that also means that if you have a cheat device in your PS1, it should in theory crash as well. So unfortunately, that does mean that for that game you will need to patch out the code in the game to make sure that it works. But if we take a look at Mednafen, they would have like they will actually check for all reads in the PIO area and set it accordingly. So it is a much more complicated fix than what basically Senqua did for PCSX Rearmed. If we take a look, uh, yes, that one. So I then credited him for the fix which affects reads, but it turns out that writes to the PIO area are also affected as well, which is why uh, I had a separate commit for it. Huh. So no PIO no uh, right so writes. So this is what the writes to PIO expansion area looks like. He actually sets it to null, and for stack write just sets it to FF. So there are quite a lot of interesting stuff for PCSX Rearmed and PCSX for all. And as you can see, I did a lot of things on it. In fact, I experimented a lot on it. I even tried to, for example, codename Tenka. That game would not work if you don't have a memory card inserted, and this would happen even on real hardware. In fact, if you try to boot the game with a memory card, it will ask you to remove the memory card before playing. So in this case, we just did. I just detected the game and will just automatically turn on the setting for that. But in PCSX Rearmed, there's a setting for that you have to manually activate. So yeah, I guess we should talk about the port SDL. No, not that one. Let's take a look at my other repo. So yeah, that's the more recent fork, which unfortunately has some issues that I need to fix. Alright, it's not in port, it's actually in common. Yeah, it's in common. So basically I would have like a huge static array that I would compare the games against. So DualShock only games, so there's Ape Escape, but there's also Resident Evil 2 DualShock Edition and the Director's Cuts DualShock Edition. Then you have dual analog improved games, so it's Combat, Armored Trooper, Proton, Siberia, Descent, Maximum, Formula 1 97, and so on. A lot of games actually. And then I would compare the CD-ROM ID against those games, and then enable the analog mod appropriately. I would also apply specific games that way. So for example, Inuyasha, I would enable the VSync hack, the memory card check for Codename Tenka, and the hack fix for Parasite Eve and Vandal Hearts. So yeah, if we take a look at front end, actually no, not that one, but yeah, let me find the alright path, because that's one important bit. So oh my god, yeah, that required me a lot of work for that, because as you can see, initially it just looked like pad 2, but with the help of Tony and a few people actually, we needed to check for each mode and appropriately implement it. So for example, this is for dual shock, and this is what it looks like to implement a dual shock mode. I only had to make sure that it only does that for dual shock enabled games, because it would actually not work. Well, if you try a dual shock mode in games that do not intend that for it to happen, it would have like weird issues. So you need to make sure to only enable dual shock mode in games that can support it. And I actually recall taking that code from PCSX Rearmed, although for the yeah, this one, like the one that you see here, I believe that's the fix in particular for dual analog mode, because otherwise the game would simply not detect the controller, and I believe that's not done in PCSX Rearmed. So yeah, a lot of weird issues like this one, and I think that will be it for now. So that was basically the code review stuff for PCSX Rearmed, and as well as PCSX for all. And I had like a lot of fun working on those, but I don't think I will work on it again, because I think, in my opinion, uh, I did the best I could. The rest are stuff that requires like a lot more work. There are stuff like, for example, CHD files. Uh, those will need to be added from another fork. But yeah, I mostly stopped working on PCSX for all because it would have weird issues cropping up. And unfortunately, Senquak, which I was hoping to wait for him to fix the issues, he just disappeared. Like nobody knows where he is. Like last time I talked to him, he said that he was a professor at a school, so a teacher, and that's the last time I heard from him. So yeah. So thank you for listening to my rambling, and I'll see you the next time. Bye for now.